All right, we got quite a few topics here to touch on today. One of them is quite timely, quite relevant, just happened in the past couple hours. Well, I guess if you're not watching this on April 2nd, that statement doesn't apply, but you get my point because some of you are watching this on April 2nd, right? One of them is related to that first round pick that the Indianapolis Colts have, which I know is a topic that you all find very, very interesting, as you should. We're really getting closer and closer to the draft. That thing's going to sneak up on us. Before you know it, it's going to be draft night, and we're going to see who the Colts are drafting. So, of course, we're going to talk about that. And the other topic is really the one that I find perhaps the most interesting of all of them, the one that may not be on the forefront of everyone's mind, but again, the one that I want to talk about because I think as we get closer to the season, it is going to be a relevant topic, and I just want to be a little bit ahead of the curve on it. So we're going to cover all of these topics throughout the course of this episode in the order that they are listed on the title. So if you want to figure out exactly where I'm starting, you could go ahead and look at that title and figure it out just fine. Now, of course, there are timestamps in the description. They're always there, so you can skip to exactly where it is that you want to be. You could listen to this episode however it is that you like. Does that sound good, Colts Nation? All right. If that sounds good, then let's get right into it. So last episode that I put out, I had spoken a bit about Anthony Richardson. It's the first time we had touched on Anthony in quite some time. And one of the things I had spoken to specifically was a question about his style of play that he was asked at his postseason, or I guess end of season really, press conference. And he essentially, when asked whether or not he needs to change the way he plays, says, no, I ain't got to change whatsoever. The organization drafted me for a reason. I've been playing like this my whole life, and they drafted me to be that guy, not some different guy. And then after that, on the back end, he kind of snuck in the fact that, sure, he could be a little bit smarter about the way he protects himself, but it wasn't really the main point of what he was saying. Now, it was my statement that I made in the last episode that I did not love that response. Now, I didn't disagree with his assessment of the situation. I absolutely agreed with everything he said, but I guess I was just worried on some level, right? I suppose I would have preferred that he led with the fact that he understands he needs to protect himself better and then spoke about the rest of the stuff, as opposed to making the part about protecting his body some sort of sideshow of a statement. Now, of course, he did answer that live and in real time. So maybe if he had a second chance to answer that question with a little bit more thought, he would have said something different. I mean, after all, I, of all people with the microphone in my face who goes live to recording with no edits, should absolutely understand that. But nonetheless, this is what we have to go off of. All we have to go off of is what he said. And when I spoke about this last episode, all I said was, hey, Anthony Richardson seems to be a guy that is committed to dropping back and being a passer. If you actually look into some of the Florida Gators fans and their gripes with what Anthony Richardson brought to the table when he was in school, they wished he ran the football more. And when you look at the stats for quarterbacks that year on the ground, I mean, there are quite a few guys that had more yardage than him, despite the fact that he was far and away the best in terms of yards per carry. Give me a second on some water. 3 minutes in, can't even catch a breath here. Right. So, again, as far as him being a pocket passer goes, all I'm saying is if you're Shane Steichen and you know this to be true about Anthony Richardson, and we know that he's far better at it than many of us expected him to be, why not just lean into it a little bit? And I'll tell you, I thought that was one of the most agreeable statements I had ever made. I said, hey, we don't need another quarterback getting hurt. We don't want it. As Colts fans, that's the last thing we need to see is another quarterback getting hurt because we feel the need to allow him to take a ton of hits, right? That's all I said. I thought it was the most agreeable statement I had ever made. And much to my surprise, there were some mixed opinions on that take right there. So I ended up following up with a poll on the page. By the way, for all you guys that participate in this type of stuff, thank you so much. It makes recording the show much, much easier, right? Because as opposed to me just speaking into the void, I can actually speak to you guys directly. So the engagement, of course, always appreciated. But I took this poll, right? That's besides the point, realistically. I'm just taking a moment to give you a little bit of gratitude. Point being is the poll as it currently stands. I asked, did I even say what I asked in that poll? I asked whether or not you guys wanted to see Shane Steichen design less running plays for Anthony Richardson or really call less designed runs for Anthony Richardson. And it sits about as close to even money as it could possibly get. Slightly in the favor of you saying yes, You do want to see less design runs for Anthony Richardson, but we're talking to the tune of like 55-45, right? So that is basically even money in the world of a poll, particularly when you have hundreds of people participating, right? I mean, that's basically 1-for-1, 50-50. And given that, I wanted to explore this topic a bit more because I think there's quite a few angles you can approach it from. And I do think it's fascinating, and I do feel the need to expand upon what it was that I was talking about in that episode. So, for starters, let me just say I agree with the sentiments that many of you have expressed. When you draft a guy who could be argued as the most athletic quarterback to ever enter the NFL, you don't just not use that part of his game, right? I mean, Shane Steichen is well known for his ability to tailor his offense to his players' strengths to lean into what makes them special. And the definition of special, by the way, is literally better, greater, or otherwise different from what is usual. So I think when we talk about Anthony Richardson's ability to run the football as a quarterback, I think he's the definition of special as an athlete. Can we not agree on that? So it's the question really is not so much whether or not he should run and we should call running plays for him. The question really is to what degree. And that's where the nuance comes in, because I don't care how many times you guys may say that he can just as possibly get hurt in the pocket on a sack versus running the football. That is not really the point. The point is that oftentimes these injuries are not from one isolated hit. It really becomes an accumulation over time, right? An additional exposure to the possibility of getting hurt, right? Because, like, in theory, if you were to get in your car today and then get into your car tomorrow, you're just as likely to get into a car accident on both days. You follow it? But let me ask you this. Which do you view as a drive that is more likely to get you into an accident? A 5-minute drive or a 3-hour drive? Now, I know your answer to that question. Of course, it's the 3-hour drive because you're giving yourselves more possibility in that time, in that extended drive, to get into a car accident. So if you can acknowledge that is true, you start to see where this idea of protecting Anthony Richardson and his health isn't all just blind luck and chance that is outside of our control. And the truth of the matter is that Anthony Richardson, despite his insane, immense talent and upside, is a human being. So even though, of course, it is on him to protect himself when we call these running plays, we want him to slide all of these things in real time when things are moving that fast on the football field. Instincts and learned behaviors are often going to take over. So when you take a guy at his size and consider the fact that, quite frankly, he has not had to worry about the guy trying to tackle him for the most part of his career of Port being a threat to him physically, right? In terms of this guy is bigger than me, this guy can hurt me. That, for the most part, is new to him. When you take that into account and the fact that we know he is a football player, right? Like, you can just tell from how Anthony Richardson plays. It's just how he's wired. He's going to lay down the lumber. He cannot help himself. He wants to be a part of the game. He doesn't want to play flag football. He doesn't want to play touch, two-hand touch, right? Anthony Richardson wants to be a part of the game. And can he unlearn that, right? That is the question at hand. Can he unlearn that? And all I'm saying is I'm not so sure. Maybe he can. Maybe he won't. But nonetheless, why bank on that and that alone? Why bank on his ability to overcome those instincts that he has developed over years and years of playing on the field, right? Because if you're Shane Steichen, you have to some degree take it upon yourself, if you ask me. I mean, you have to feel some level of responsibility to help Anthony Richardson protect himself with your play calling. Do you not? Am I wrong about that? I mean, how can you possibly disagree with that statement? That Shane Steichen has some level of control here, even if not an ultimate level of control. There's something there. I mean, I know if I were him, I'd be thinking long and hard about how exactly I plan to deploy Anthony's running ability, because just like AR in game, everything is moving so fast. If you're Shane Steichen, you're going to fall back on your instincts as well. And I forget who the coach was of Carolina at the time. Maybe it was Matt Rule. Not 100% sure, but he had mentioned the fact that on game day, it was hard to not give Christian McCaffrey 30, 35 touches a game every single week because he is that good, right? I'd imagine Shane Steichen feels much of the same way when he's talking about these design running plays with Anthony Richardson, and I don't blame him, right? I fully understand schematically the advantages that running him can bring you, right? You talk these plays in the NFL. For those of you who don't, they can build off of each other if you're really doing it at a high level, right? Because one play, you could have Anthony hand it off to Jonathan Taylor, and then another play, Anthony could keep it himself, and then another play, he could keep it, roll out, and actually end up throwing it. And meanwhile, each of those plays started in the same formation with the same action pre-snap or the same lack of action pre-snap, whatever it may be, and then kind of the same look off the ball. So those wrinkles are what makes an offense very, very scary, because defensively you're getting hit with three plays that look exactly the same. So even if you studied film, you know, these plays look the same. Meanwhile, they're resulting in something different. It becomes pretty hard to keep up, right? Particularly over the course of a game. So, it's one of those things that you see guys like Kyle Shanahan do so well and Sean McVay do so well. But on the other hand, you do, if you're Shane Steichen, you have to weigh that with the reality of your quarterback being sustainable in this league. And you think about all the guys in this league who have had long, wonderful careers at the quarterback position, and how many of them are running quarterbacks, like guys who are run-first quarterbacks? How many of them are? I dare you to name 3 that got it done at a high level after the age of 34 or 35. In fact, hell, you know what? Give me one. I'll even let you use Google. Give me one guy that was a running quarterback that was still doing it at a high level after the age of 34, 35 years old. Because a pass-first style of play just ages far better in this league for health purposes, obviously, but also nobody get more effective as a runner as they age. I mean, I'm only 27 years old, and I know that all too well. And I know some of you guys are older than me, so you understand it perhaps even better. So even with some of the rules that we have in place in this league to protect quarterbacks, at the end of the day, perception is reality. If you remember back in Cam Newton's day, one of the issues the Panthers were running into with him was the fact that he was not getting the same calls as other quarterbacks when it came to like roughing the passers and unnecessary roughnesses and things of that nature. Now, why was that? Well, in lack of a better way to put it, he was out there laying motherfuckers out, right? And at some point, you got to give the defense some chance somewhere over the course of a game. Am I right? And as a ref, it is hard to penalize a defender for hitting a guy who has been laying it on them all game. So if you play physical in this league, the refs may allow you to be a part of more physical plays because, quite frankly, you don't exactly show up as a guy who needs to be protected. Does that make sense? Because it is what it is. I mean, I could go on all day about this, right? Because is that right? Is that right that that's what it is? It's not really the point, right? It's the fact that we have to live in the reality that is. So these are all things that we have to consider, or really Shane Steichen has to consider moving forward. And all I'm saying is that it would be nice if perhaps you could be a bit selective about when it is that you run the football with Anthony Richardson. Like 1st and 10 from the 50-yard line, must we do that, right? Yeah, paid Jonathan Taylor. Yeah, paid Michael Pittman. Must the yardage really come from a designed QB run at that part of the field? I mean, there's no other way to get it done. It's just food for thought. That's all I'm saying. Right now, we've gotten through that. We'll talk about the more relevant stuff. Right? Let's talk about Julian Blackmon. Let's talk about the Colts' first-round pick. But before we do, you know what it is? I got to introduce myself. My name is Justin. This right here is the Ride on the Bench Colts podcast. Of course, I ask anyone enjoying the episode, watching on YouTube, go ahead, shoot a like. It's going to help me get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. If you keep coming back, enjoying the content, you've yet to subscribe, perhaps today is the day. We have blown past, what are we even at right now? 2,300 or something like that. We're shooting for 2,400 next. We really want like 3,000 plus going in to the upcoming Colts season, but we're just going to take this a little bit at a time. If you're here, if you're enjoying, if you have not subscribed, then perhaps today is the day. Most importantly, let's just talk Colts football. Let's have a good time. Let's be civil in the comment section. Let's further the discussion. Let's become a smarter fan base together. And right, all the la-di-da-di-da, right? All that shit's out of the way. Let's talk about Julian Blackmon. So for those of you who have been following along every episode 1, of course, thank you very much for doing so. Without your engagement, perhaps I would be less inspired to come out here onto the camera and onto the mic and talk to you. But also, 2, and more importantly, I said it, I'll go with it. You may remember me discussing the increasing likelihood that Julian Blackmon re-signed with us. And the factors that I had put into that when I came to you with that was that he had visited the Bills and the 49ers. And the Bills, after his visit, signed Mike Edwards. And then he left San Francisco without a deal, and it had been like the better part of 4 or 5 days at that point. You coupled those things with the inactivity the Colts had at safety, and I just thought all of those things were kind of highly pointed towards a reunion with the team. Now, I then said that perhaps, and I didn't know this for sure, it was just a guess based off of the context clues, that I figured perhaps because he had this unique combination of talent and youth, but also an injury history, that perhaps both sides were not quite sure what his market value was going to be. And in spite of that, which I thought was a very reasonable deduction, there's quite a few of you that thought Julian Blackmon was as good as gone. But then, sure enough, in the coming days, we saw the reports that they had re-engaged in contract negotiations, and now here we are with Julian Blackmon re-signed on a one-year deal that, as I record this, we don't know exactly how much it is. I'm sure that in a short period of time, if not already, we'll know that contract's value. And I really feel like, to some degree, I was one of the only people that brought that to you guys before the reports of them re-engaging in talks came out. And I'll tell you, there is a lesson in this. And listen, I'm not good at many things. Okay, I'm really not. And I don't just say this, right? Like, if you were to give me like a seventh grade like math equation, I could not solve it. Okay, like I'm terrible at that. You give me a screwdriver and the screw, I'd put a hole in my head, right? Like, I need like an instruction manual. Like, I don't have a lot of talents, but when it comes to the Indianapolis Colts, I have never been wrong in my entire life. And that is not hyperbole. I'm not exaggerating. It's the truth. I have never been wrong about this team. Period. Like, it's one of my only talents is that I can sit here, come behind a microphone, yap, and then be right so often. Like, I didn't ask to be this way. Like, I didn't ask to just be right about the Colts all the time. I just am, right? They don't call me Coach Stradamus for nothing. I just happen to make a lot of proper predictions about this team. Many of you who were around before this past season are well aware of that, and perhaps that's why you stick around. Perhaps there's other reasons you stick around. I don't know. And some of you who are newer to the channel are going to learn that. And I don't just say that to be a braggart. I don't just say that to be arrogant, although I do enjoy partaking in that from time to time. I can't lie to you. But I bring that up as a pretense to the statement I'm about to make. Now that Julian Blackmon is back with the Indianapolis Colts, and you look at everybody we re-signed, and you look at the roster last year, and you look at the roster right now, and you realize there are no new holes here. We are at a point now where the Colts can only get better than they were last year from here on out. The continuity between both the roster and the coaching staff is huge, okay? I know a lot of you guys don't understand that yet, and I know you're all enamored with what the rest of the division has done, even though I think the Jaguars got worse, quite frankly, and that just is what it is. But I am telling you right now, as someone who has never been wrong about this team in his life, the Colts are still just as much of a threat for the AFC South as they were last year. Now, if my opinion on that changes, I'm going to be honest. I know a lot of you guys think someone said like I glaze often the India. Lord forbid I tell the truth, right? Lord forbid I provide a counter argument and a counter opinion to all you guys who are just crying in the comment section all the time. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm telling what I believe to be the truth, and I'm quite confident in telling you this. This team, once again, just like I said last offseason, is far better than most of you think it is, which I feel is going to be more clear when we get out of the draft, which brings us, of course, to that part of the show. Now, if you look at the betting odds of the Colts' first round pick, let me pull that up real fast so I don't. There it is. All right. So you have Quinton Mitchell at a 28.6% chance being drafted by the Indianapolis Colts, a 23.5% chance that they draft Terrion Arnold, and then a 12.5% chance that they draft Kool-Aid McKinstry. Is that how you pronounce his name? McKinstry? That has to be how you pronounce his name. And then you have 22.2% Brock Bowers, 13.3% Brian Thomas, 20% the field. So, real quick little math. As I told you, I can't do math worth a lick. So I'm going to pull out the calculator. Of course, these glasses very real. I need these glasses. These aren't from a Waldo Halloween costume or anything like that. These are real specs. So if you were to add that up on the corners, 28.6% for Quinton Mitchell, plus 23.5% for Terrion Arnold, plus 12.5% for Mr. Kool-Aid, you're talking about a 65% chance that the Colts are to draft a corner if you ask, I don't know, the odds makers, whoever those people may be. And then you couple that with the fact that Pro Football Focus, who, by the way, had us at a 3-win team or something like that going into last season, but neither here nor there, they say our biggest needs are tight end, corner, and safety. So you put those two things together, and they would really have you think that we're drafting a corner at that pick. But I would not rule out, if I were you, and I'm just trying to get you prepared for this now, I would not rule out a wide receiver or other offensive playmaker, a Brock Bowers. And I know some of you guys, the first round tight end, this I understand. Okay, but neither here nor there. He's going to be on the board, and someone's going to have to take him. Not saying we should or shouldn't, just saying if he's there, the Colts may very well do it, and we'll see how that works out. I would not rule out a weapon, whether it be a wide receiver or Bowers, and I would not rule out a trade back. And here's why, because Chris Ballard recently, when asked about the Colts corners, and these are some quotes, albeit I'm not like listening to the interview, I'm just giving you what NFL.com says. Chris Ballard says, he said, well, right, what does Chris Ballard do? He says, well, look, I like our 3 young corners. Now, Juju Brents has got to be healthy. We got to get Dallas Flowers back healthy, which we think we will. We think both of them are very good. And I think we kind of underestimated what Jalen Jones did. I thought Jones played really good football last year and did against some very talented wideouts and never backed down. We think these guys are going to continue to get better. So, given that statement right there, all of a sudden you say, well, okay, are we 100% sure that the Colts are going corner? Because I'll tell you, unpopular opinion right here, as per usual, I happen to agree with what Chris Ballard said there. I don't disagree with that. Now, I don't think we really had a play-to-play coverage issue last year on defense. I think we had a big play issue last year. As Ballard said, I'll just reiterate him because in my opinion, Juju needs to stay healthy, but he looked damn good when he was on the field. Not perfect, of course. Part of that was due to a lack of reps and kind of like he didn't really have like a full training camp or preseason or anything of that nature. It was what it was. Presumably he'll get better. Jalen Jones continues to get very little credit from much of Colts Nation. He was our most reliable guy all season and gave us good work out there against good receivers, right? Again, second most explosive plays in football. But as a pass defense per the numbers, we were actually kind of relatively average, all things considered. And you wonder if there was less explosive plays, how those numbers would have looked a little bit different. I don't know for sure. I'm just kind of presenting that as a bit of nuance to the discussion. Now, I'm not at all suggesting we don't draft a corner high in this draft. That's not what I'm suggesting. Just to clarify, before you guys go crazy, if you even get to this point, all I'm saying is I don't think it needs to be the first round pick. I don't think we need to go corner there. Okay? And I say that for one reason and one reason only. And you take from this what you will. I am more confident with this wide receiver class that the wide receiver we drafted the 15th overall pick, let's say, would be better than Alec Pierce, then I am confident that the cornerback that we drafted that pick would be better than either Juju Brents or Jalen Jones coming in. Okay? Like, is that crazy? Is that crazy? I want you to know. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe I am. I don't know. That's just how I feel. But why couldn't it be offensive playmaker in the first and then corner in the second? Why couldn't it go offensive playmaker, safety, and then corner? I'm not saying one of those ways is right and one of those ways is wrong. I'm just saying there is really no actual reason to have such tunnel vision with this pick as it relates to drafting a corner. We don't know what the Colts are going to do. But the odds, I guess, would say that we're more likely to draft a corner. And we'll be getting in the mock draft soon over here. But in the meantime, I just wanted to plant that seed for you guys because I don't know. Maybe some of my mock drafts may look different than other people. Is that me being a contrarian? Is that this brain being ginormous? I don't know. That'll be up for you to decide. But until then, until next time, my name is Justin. This right here was the Ride on the Bench Colts podcast. And as always, go Colts.